what if the only thing preventing you from achieving, like, elite physical performance is the fact that your body is completely healthy?
I mean, it's quite the hook, isn't it?
Right, but just, imagine it. You wake up and your shoulder is just radiating this deep, agonizing ache.
Ugh, the worst.
Yeah. And you have to step onto the court for this really high-stakes match, and you are terrified of making the injury worse. You can barely lift your arm.
So you're baiting it. You have to hold back on every single swing.
Exactly. You are forced to hold back.
Yeah.
And then this bizarre biomechanical anomaly happens. You actually play better.
Which is wild.
It's totally wild. Your technique is suddenly elite. You're executing these shots with a level of precision and speed and grace that you have literally never achieved before.
Yeah, and it completely defies the most basic logic that we're taught about physical performance.
Oh, so.
Well, we're conditioned from day one to believe that output is directly proportional to effort.
Right.
Like if you want to hit a ball harder.
You swing the bat faster.
Exactly. If you want to jump higher, you push harder. We treat our bodies like combustion engines. More fuel, more fire, more power.
Right. The whole give it 110% mentality.
Yeah, but this scenario, it completely flips that paradigm. The injury actually forced a reduction in conscious effort, and the biological system, well, it optimized itself.
And that paradox, that is the engine of today's deep dive. We've got our hands on this fascinating, just incredibly granular breakdown of badminton biomechanics.
It's such a great source.
It really is. It's a real-time documentation of a player who experienced this exact anomaly. They realized that their shoulder injury had, like, accidentally bypassed years of bad habits.
And unlocked this elite-level kinetic sequencing.
Yes. So our mission today is to decode this. We are going to explore how forced relaxation, literally doing less, somehow generates more power, more speed, and infinitely more precision.
And we definitely won't just be talking in abstracts either. We're going to unpack the literal physics, the underlying physiological mechanics of what was actually happening in that player's nervous system.
Because it's not magic.
No, not at all. It's just a pure application of biomechanics. And honestly, it extends far beyond just one single racket sport.
Oh, absolutely.
Once you understand the architecture of this kinetic shift, you start to realize it governs almost any high-level physical skill. I mean, from pitching a baseball to the mechanics of a golf swing, or even, playing a cello.
Wow, a cello. Okay, let's jump straight into the moment of discovery from the sources. So the player steps onto the court, screaming shoulder, and they have to execute a drop shot.
Right, the drop shot.
And the fundamental challenge of a drop shot, structurally anyway, is the deception. You're mimicking the full kinetic wind-up of a heavy smash, but right at the moment of impact, the shuttlecock just, tumbles delicately over the net.
It's all about touch.
Exactly. But the sources note that before the injury, this player really struggled with that touch. They said it felt like pushing cotton. Why would a completely healthy arm produce such a mushy shot?
Well, it comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of muscle allocation. The sources point out that amateurs tend to rely on their macro muscles to govern delicate tasks.
Macro muscles being like the big ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When we talk about macro muscles here, we're looking at the deltoids, the pectoralis major, the latissimus dorsi, the biceps.
Okay.
These are massive, dense bundles of muscle fibers. They were designed by evolution for gross motor movements, pulling yourself up a tree or lifting a heavy rock.
Right. They
are not engineered for millimeter-level, microsecond precision.
So using a deltoid to control the steep downward trajectory of this feather-light shuttlecock is inherently mismatched.
Completely mismatched.
It's kind of like trying to do calligraphy with a thick, heavy paintbrush that you'd use for painting a barn.
That captures the structural problem perfectly, yeah. The macro muscles actually have fewer nerve endings per muscle fiber compared to our hands.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Their motor unit recruitment is blunt, so when you try to orchestrate a delicate drop shot by, swinging the big arm,
you just can't get that crisp snap.
Exactly. You cannot generate the sharp deceleration required to impart that tumbling spin on the bird. The energy transfer is sluggish, which is exactly why the player described the sensation as pushing cotton.
Because the racket head is just sort of plowing through the air rather than snapping.
You nailed it.
But then the injury enters the equation. The shoulder is compromised. The player physically cannot initiate that blunt swinging motion with the deltoid, because the pain response acts as a hard biological limit.
The body just says no.
Right. So how does a crippled shoulder result in a sharper drop shot?
Because of a concept the sources outline that we can call the sudden break. As the arm comes forward for the shot, the brain receives this pain signal from the inflamed shoulder joint.
Okay.
And the nervous system always prioritizes preservation over the sport, so it slams the brakes on the macro muscles.
Just totally stops them.
Yeah, the entire arm stops abruptly in midair just before the racket reaches the shuttlecock.
Wait, hold on. If the arm completely stops moving before hitting the bird, how is there any power left to actually hit the shot? Doesn't the racket just, like, die in the air?
You'd think so, but that's where the law of conservation of momentum takes over.
Oh, physics time.
Yeah, so momentum is mass times velocity. You have this relatively heavy human arm moving forward, generating significant kinetic energy.
Right.
When the shoulder muscles suddenly arrest that forward motion, the energy cannot just vanish. It has to go somewhere.
Okay.
And because the arm is a linked kinetic chain, shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist to fingers, that forward momentum travels instantly down the chain.
Oh, okay, let me test my understanding of the physics here.
Yeah.
It's like driving a speeding car and slamming on the brakes.
Yes.
The car itself stops, but all the kinetic energy transfers to whatever is loose inside the cabin. Like a heavy box in the back seat doesn't stop. It just flies forward and slams into the windshield.
That analogy actually scales perfectly to the anatomy.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, in this scenario, your shoulder joint is the seatbelt abruptly stopping the chassis of the car, which is your upper arm.
Okay.
And the heavy box flying forward, that's the momentum transferring into your forearm and eventually right into the micro joints of the fingers.
The fingers. So by breaking the upper arm, the energy is violently channeled down into the fingertips.
Exactly.
But wait, the fingers are tiny. How do they handle that sudden surge of kinetic energy without getting injured themselves?
Because they're the ultimate precision instruments of the human body. The flexor tendons in your forearm operate the fingers like this highly complex pulley system.
Wow.
When that wave of momentum hits the hand at the exact moment of impact, the fingers naturally execute a tiny, incredibly sharp squeezing motion to stabilize the racket.
So it's not even a conscious thing.
No, it's a subconscious micromanipulation. That sudden, crisp snap of the fingers is what creates the perfect steep arc. The racket head whips forward over the span of a few centimeters with devastating speed,
While the arm remains perfectly still.
while the arm is completely still.
That fundamentally changes how I view athletic training. I mean, the body bypassed the blunt instrument of the shoulder out of pure self-preservation.
Right.
And in doing so, it outsourced the movement to the exact anatomical tools, the fingers that were meant to do the job all along.
Yeah, we spend years fighting our own biomechanics, trying to force the big muscles to be delicate.
Yeah.
And a little bit of pain instantly rewires the kinetic chain. It forces efficiency.
Because the nervous system prunes away all the unnecessary noisy movements because they hurt.
Exactly.
Which brings up a really fascinating secondary effect mentioned in the sources. The pain didn't just fix the dynamic swinging drop shot. It completely overhauled the most static, delicate motion in the sport, which is the net serve.
Oh, the net serve?
Yeah, a net serve has to skim the tape of the net by literal millimeters. If it's high, it's killed by the opponent. If it's low, it's a fault.
It's all about fine motor control.
Right. And the sources note that because of the injury, the player had to pin their elbow strictly to their side. So how does restricting your range of motion improve a task that requires that level of surgical accuracy?
Well, to unpack that, we have to look at the biological noise inherent in the human body. The sources contrast two styles of execution here. They call them excavator embroidery versus watchmaker micromanipulation.
Excavator embroidery. That is a hilarious visual. So it's like trying to thread a needle using the hydraulic arm of a massive construction vehicle.
That is exactly the concept.
Okay.
If you are attempting a delicate net serve with your elbow floating out in the air, disconnected from your torso, you are engaging the rotator cuff, the deltoids, and the trapezius just to hold the arm up.
Right, just fighting gravity.
Yes, and every one of those muscle groups is burning ATP and microadjusting. Furthermore, you have a pulse. Right, you are breathing. Every heartbeat and respiration cycle sends a microtremor down that free-floating arm. You have introduced dozens of degrees of freedom, basically, variables of movement in three-dimensional space into a system that requires total stillness.
You're trying to steady the excavator arm while the engine is literally vibrating underneath you.
Exactly.
So when the amateur gets nervous on game point and their serve gets shaky, it's not just psychological fear.
No, not at all.
It's literal physiological instability amplifying through the long lever of the arm.
Correct. The anxiety increases the heart rate and muscle tension, which only exacerbates the microtremors in those macro muscles.
Oh, wow.
But look at the injured player. The pain forced them to lock their elbow tightly against their ribs. By anchoring the upper arm to the torso, they eliminated the excavator.
They took it completely offline.
Yeah. They removed the shoulder from the equation entirely, dropping those degrees of freedom essentially down to zero.
They turned the arm into a fixed tripod.
Yes. And with the volatile variables locked out, the only moving parts left were the thumb and the index finger.
The watchmaker.
The watchmaker. Think about it. A real watchmaker doesn't hover their entire arm over a tiny gear. They rest their forearms solidly on the workbench and isolate the movement strictly to the fingertips.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yes.
The injured player naturally replicated this workbench stabilization.
Exactly.
The sources mentioned a very specific mechanical rhythm to this watchmaker technique, too. They call it the empty grip.
Ah, yes.
They essentially hold the racket as loosely as humanly possible, just kind of resting it in the fingers,
Yeah.
to avoid triggering any tension in the injured shoulder.
Right.
But I'm struggling with the latency here. If you hold the racket loosely, you have to eventually squeeze it to hit the shuttlecock. Doesn't the delay between the brain sending the squeeze signal and the fingers actually tensing up cause you to mishit the bird?
It seems like it would, but that's the genius of the relaxed tighten rhythm. You maintain the empty grip throughout the entire setup. The tightening happens only in the final 0.01 seconds before impact.
That fast.
Yes. And as for the latency, the neural pathway from the motor cortex to the finger flexors is incredibly fast. But more importantly, this rhythm relies heavily on proprioception and predictive timing, much of which is handled by the cerebellum.
So you aren't consciously thinking, squeeze now.
No, you'd be too late.
Yeah.
The brain calculates the trajectory of the falling shuttlecock and automatically fires the motor units in the fingers at the precise millisecond of impact.
And because the muscles start from a state of total relaxation, that sudden contraction is just explosive.
Explosive and clean.
Yeah.
If your forearm is already tense because you are gripping the racket tightly from the start, adding more tension to hit the schnut is sluggish.
It's like a rubber band that's already stretched to its limit.
Right, it has no snap left. The empty grip ensures the rubber band is completely slack, allowing for a violent, instantaneous snap right at contact.
And it prevents the tension from creeping up the arm into the shoulder.
Which protects the injury while inadvertently delivering the crispest possible strike to the shuttle.
It's an incredibly elegant mechanical workaround. By locking out the massive joints, you isolate the precision instruments.
It really is.
But, okay, this forces us to address a massive, glaring question.
Let's hear it.
We've established that the pain cured these bad habits. The pain forced the relaxation in the finger snap technique. But tracing the kinetic chain backward, why was this player's shoulder hurting so badly in the first place?
Yes, the origin story of the injury. It is perhaps the most illuminating part of the entire biomechanical breakdown.
I'm all ears.
The player confesses in the source material that prior to the injury, they were trying to generate maximum power by actively crushing the floor with their toes.
Crushing the floor. I mean, I have to admit, that sounds intuitively correct.
A lot of people think so.
Right. Every athletic coach, whether you were throwing a punch or swinging a baseball bat, preaches that power comes from the ground up. You have to use the floor. So how does heavily utilizing the ground end up destroying the shoulder joint?
Well, the flaw lies in the difference between generating ground reaction forces and grinding into the floor.
Okay.
To understand the mechanism of the injury, the sources introduce this physics concept of impulse and momentum. The equation is force multiplied by the change in time equals the change in momentum. So $4 Satsi T equals dPA.
Yeah, let's break that equation down so we can visualize what's happening in the athlete's body.
Right.
Force times time equals momentum.
Right. If you want to impart a massive change in momentum to the racket, basically, to swing it incredibly fast, you need to apply force.
Makes sense.
The player believed that applying a massive, heavy force into the ground would translate to massive momentum in the racket, but they ignored the critical variable, which is delta, the duration of contact time.
Yeah.
By crushing the floor, digging their toes in and pressing heavily, they dramatically increased the amount of time their foot was actually grounded.
Oh, I see. They turned a dynamic, explosive step into a static, heavy squat.
Exactly.
But wait, why doesn't a heavy squat generate power for a swing? Olympic lifters generate insane amounts of force from a heavy, grounded stance.
True, but it comes down to the intended outcome of the movement. An Olympic lifter is trying to move a massive external load vertically over a short distance.
Okay.
They need immense structural rigidity to prevent their spine from collapsing under the weight.
Right, that makes sense.
But a racket sport, or a baseball pitch that requires high-velocity rotational and ballistic movement. When you crush the floor and increase that contact time, your nervous system responds to that sustained pressure by commanding the leg muscles to stabilize.
Oh. It locks them down.
Precisely. The calves tense, the quadriceps and hamstrings fire simultaneously, the glutes clench, and this cascade of muscular contraction travels upward, creating what the sources identify as global tension, or a state of interlocking muscles.
So it's antagonistic co-contraction. The brain is firing the muscles that bend the knee and the muscles that straighten the knee at the exact same time.
Yes.
The engine is revving to the red line, but the parking brake is fully engaged.
That is exactly what is happening physiologically.
Right.
And because the entire lower body and core are now frozen in this state of interlocking tension, the hips physically cannot rotate.
The kinetic chain is severed at the waist.
You got it.
Okay, I see the disaster forming here. The legs are bolted to the floor, the hips are frozen in cement, but the brain is still demanding that the arm deliver a 200-mile-per-hour smash over the net.
Right, so the brain sends an emergency override. The lower body has failed to generate rotational momentum, so the brain screams at the upper body to compensate.
And what happens?
The player violently yanks their shoulder back, trying to muscle the racket through the air using only the isolated strength of the deltoid and rotator cuff.
But the arm isn't floating in space. It's attached to a torso that is currently rigid as a stone column.
And that is the iron bar syndrome.
The iron bar syndrome.
Yeah. Imagine a fluid leather bullwhip. If you flick your wrist, a kinetic wave travels smoothly down the whip until it breaks the sound barrier at the tip.
Okay.
Now imagine freezing that leather whip in liquid nitrogen until it is a solid iron bar, and then violently twisting the handle.
The bar doesn't flex at all. The energy has nowhere to go, so it just shears and fractures right at the handle.
Exactly.
And the handle is the shoulder joint.
Right. The entire kinetic load of the swing, rather than flowing up from the floor and out through the racket, gets trapped and detonates inside the shoulder capsule.
Ouch.
Yeah. The tendons of the rotator cuff are forced to absorb these massive shearing forces, grinding against the acromion bone, doing that hundreds of times a match. It's a guaranteed recipe for severe inflammation and tearing.
So crushing the floor essentially turns the athlete into an iron bar, guaranteeing injury.
Yeah.
That demands a completely different approach to ground reaction forces then. How is a player actually supposed to use the ground to initiate a ballistic movement without breaking the kinetic chain?
Well, the sources provide a really striking visual corrective for this. Instead of crushing the floor to extract power, you must imagine that the floor is boiling hot.
A boiling floor, that definitely implies a desperate need to minimize contact.
Exactly. If you step onto a boiling surface, you don't dig your heel in, you touch it with the ball of your foot as lightly and sharply as possible, instantly rebounding off of it.
Right.
You minimize delta TT, the contact time, to the absolute limit.
But wait, if I act like the floor is boiling and barely touch it, I feel like I'd lose all my traction. I'm imagining like a ballet dancer delicately hopping around.
I get that, yeah.
How does a light, bouncy touch not result in me just slipping all over the court when I need to change direction violently?
It's a matter of elastic recoil versus muscular grinding. When you utilize the boiling floor concept, you are relying on the fascial network and the Achilles tendon to act like heavy-duty springs.
Little springs, then.
Yeah. When your foot strikes the ground lightly and quickly, the tendon stretches and instantly recoils. It returns the energy upward without requiring the massive leg muscles to enter that state of interlocking tension.
So it's a completely different mechanism.
Entirely. The contact is incredibly brief, but because the force is delivered sharply, the actual impulse is higher.
So the traction comes from the sharpness of the strike, not the depth of the push.
Yes. And most crucially, because the leg muscles don't have time to lock up into a heavy squat, the hips remain loose and fluid. The kinetic chain is open.
Wow.
The elastic rebound from the floor can travel seamlessly up through the legs into a relaxed pelvis and right up the spine.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the most counterintuitive revelation in this entire analysis, in my opinion.
Ah, the engine.
Yeah. If the legs are just light springs bounding off a boiling floor and the shoulder is totally relaxed to avoid the iron bar syndrome, where is the actual engine?
Good question.
If the floor isn't the primary generator and the massive arm muscles aren't the primary generator, what is actually producing the terminal velocity required for an elite level smash?
The engine is the core,
Yeah.
but not in the way most people understand core strength.
But we aren't talking about doing crunches.
Definitely not crunches. The sources describe the power generation as the rattle drum effect.
The rattle drum.
Yeah, the waist and the deep core muscles act as a rotational amplifier, while the arm serves merely as a bracket.
A bracket. Okay, you are reducing the human arm with all its complex musculature to a piece of passive scaffolding. I'm going to push back on this heavily.
Go for it.
If a projectile is flying at my face, I instinctively feel that I have to use my arm muscles to get my racket there in time. I mean, the waist is a large, heavy cylinder. The hand is light and fast. You're telling me that to hit something fast, I should rely on the slow rotation of my torso rather than the quick twitch of my arm.
It feels like a paradox, I know, because human proprioception is really easily fooled by the sensation of effort.
Fooled? How so?
When you tense your arm muscles to move your hand quickly, you feel a massive spike in neurological effort. Your brain interprets that high effort as high speed.
Right.
But if we break down the physics of a rattle drum, we see why that localized effort is actually incredibly slow.
Okay, to clarify for the listener, a rattle drum is one of those traditional toys with a wooden handle, a small drum head, and two beads attached by strings to the sides.
Exactly.
When you roll the handle rapidly between your palms, the strings fly out and the beads strike the drum faces.
Right. So consider the mechanics of that toy. The kinetic energy does not originate in the strings or the beads. They possess no motor of their own.
Okay.
The energy originates entirely from the rapid twisting of the central handle, the spine, and the core. As the handle rotates, centrifugal force acts upon the strings.
The strings are thrown violently outward, away from the center of rotation.
And because the strings are completely limp and passive, they offer zero resistance to that centrifugal force. They accelerate instantly, whipping the beads forward with tremendous velocity.
I see where you're going with this.
Now apply this to anatomy. The handle is your spine, driven by the massive rotational torque of the obliques and the transverse abdominis. The string is your relaxed upper arm and forearm. The bead is your hand gripping the racket.
So if the arm is the string, it has to be completely relaxed during the rotation.
Yes.
But what happens if it isn't? What happens if I try to, help the core by firing my shoulder muscles to swing the arm at the exact same time I rotate my hips? Doesn't adding muscle power to the rotational power make it even faster?
That is the ultimate trap of the amateur athlete. Adding localized muscle power to rotational power does not summate. It subtracts.
It subtracts.
Yes, it introduces a massive physiological handbrake called antagonistic friction.
Antagonistic friction. Let's dive into the biology of that. What exactly is grinding against what?
Well, when you consciously command your arm to swing quickly toward a target, your nervous system wants to protect the elbow and shoulder joints from hyperextending. It doesn't trust a ballistic, uncontrolled movement.
It makes sense. It doesn't want you to rip your arm off.
Exactly. So as your brain fires the accelerating muscles, say, the pectorals and the triceps, it simultaneously fires the decelerating muscles, the posterior deltoid, and the biceps to maintain a leash on the joint.
Wow. It's the physiological equivalent of riding the brakes while flooring the accelerator.
Exactly. The muscles literally fight each other. The sources compare this localized swinging motion to trying to push a heavy iron door open from its rusted hinges.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It requires massive, exhausting effort. It's remarkably slow, and the internal components are grinding against one another. Your bicep is acting as a friction brake against your tricep.
But if I utilize the rattle drum mechanic, if I initiate the movement entirely from the core and leave the arm completely limp?
If the arm is limp, the brain does not trigger that protective antagonistic co-contraction. The bicep and tricep remain quiet. There is no internal friction.
So the arm doesn't lift to the shuttlecock?
No, it is violently thrown to the shuttlecock by the spinning torso.
And because it's thrown by the massive torque of the core, the arm inherits an immense initial velocity without having to generate any of it independently.
It starts with a head start that the isolated shoulder muscles could never dream of achieving.
Wow.
This brings us to the ultimate secret, synthesized from the sources, the kinetic sequence. The upper arm is just a bracket swinging out from the rotating core.
Right.
The forearm is the flexible whip uncoiling from the bracket, and the fingers are the tip of the whip breaking the sound barrier.
It's a terrifyingly efficient chain reaction. You spin the core, the bracket swings out on centrifugal force, the elbow hinges and uncoils the forearm whip, and because the whole arm was relaxed during the throw, there's absolutely zero residual tension to slow down the final explosive snap of the fingers.
Exactly.
The energy transfer is practically 100% efficient.
It is the pinnacle of biomechanical optimization. The effort is minimal, but the output is catastrophic for the opponent.
Okay, conceptually, this is a masterpiece. The physics of a relaxed kinetic chain are undeniable.
They are.
But, the bridge between intellectual understanding and physical execution is notoriously difficult to cross.
Oh, absolutely.
If I step onto a court tomorrow, my survival instinct is going to hijack my nervous system the second I see a shuttlecock flying at me. I'm going to tense up, crush the floor, and swing my iron bar of an arm.
It's hardwired.
Right. So how do we hack our own neurobiology to train this relaxed rattledrum mechanic, assuming we don't have the luxury or, the misfortune of actually having a crippled shoulder to force compliance?
The sources outline a deeply psychological rather than purely physical training protocol. It is a cognitive hack they refer to as training in actor mode.
Actor mode. I love the framing of that. It's an exercise in deliberate self-deception.
It is entirely about deceiving your motor cortex. Since the injured player experienced this kinetic breakthrough primarily because they were terrified of experiencing joint pain, the protocol requires you to artificially induce that same restriction.
Okay.
You must pretend with total conviction that your shoulder is made of spun glass. You construct a psychological power exclusion zone.
So what are the parameters of this exclusion zone? If I'm playing in actor mode, what are the hard rules I'm imposing on my body?
The foundational rule is subtraction. You intentionally cap your upper body effort at roughly 30% of your maximum output.
30%.
Yeah. You refuse to lift your elbow above your chest. You refuse to initiate any movement with the deltoid. And most importantly, you hold the racket with that empty grip, pretending it's a fragile, hollow bird bone that will shatter if you squeeze it before the final 0.01 seconds of impact.
Artificially capping my effort at 30% sounds infuriating.
It is at first.
Like, if the shuttle is hit just slightly out of my reach, my instinct is to lunge and aggressively reach my arm out to save it. If I'm forbidden from reaching, I'll just miss the shot.
And that failure is exactly the mechanism of learning. By faking the fear of pain, by refusing to let the arm rescue you, you force a profound crisis in your lower body.
Oh, I see.
The nervous system realizes the arm is offline. So how does it solve the problem of a shuttlecock that is 3 feet away?
It has to move the entire chassis. It has to activate the feet.
Yes. Fear of using the arm manufactures perfect footwork.
Wow.
The neuroplasticity here is fascinating. When you strip away the crutch of the reaching arm, your brain maps a new pathway. It realizes it must step, pivot, and position the center of mass early.
Because it can't rely on last-second arm extension.
Exactly. You stop planting your feet and isolated reaching, and you begin navigating the court with your entire torso. You start positioning your core to be the engine simply because the arm is out of commission.
So by radically subtracting the capacity of the arm, you force the rest of the kinetic system to optimize its geometry.
Precisely.
I want to pause here and encourage the listener to apply this subtraction practice to a physical bottleneck in their own life.
Take a great exercise.
Right. If you are learning a complex chord progression on the guitar and your hand constantly cramps, what happens if you mentally cap your grip strength at 30%?
You'd have to find a new way to press the strings.
Exactly. What if you relax the forearm and let the sheer weight of gravity pulling your arm down to press the strings rather than squeezing with your thumb?
That's the exact same principle.
Or in golf, what if you swing with what feels like half the effort? It's remarkable how capping local effort forces global mechanical efficiency.
It is one of the most effective ways to rewrite a flawed motor enneagram. However, we do have to address a highly critical caveat presented in the sources.
Uh-oh, there's a catch.
There is. While actor mode is a phenomenal training wheel for mapping footwork and the rattle drum rotation, it is not a permanent state of existence. You cannot stay in actor mode forever.
Why not? If forced relaxation is the key to perfect drop shots, surgical net serves, and zero-friction energy transfer, why wouldn't I just adopt the glass shoulder persona permanently?
Because of the structural demands of the ultimate offensive weapon, the heavy smash.
Right.
For delicate touches, drop shots, and flat drives, the core-to-finger rattle drum chain is more than sufficient. But if you want to elevate off the ground and hit a truly devastating terminal smash from the deep back boundary line, the shoulder complex must be integrated back into the system.
Wait, I feel like we are contradicting the entire premise here. I thought we just established that using the big shoulder muscles turns you into an iron bar and causes antagonistic friction.
It does if you use the shoulder as the engine. But in an elite heavy smash, the shoulder is not the engine. It is a vital transmission bearing.
A transmission bearing. Okay, explain that difference.
The rotational torque generated by a jumping core is violently massive. If your shoulder remains completely limp and lowered in actor mode during a full-powered jump smash, the kinetic energy will literally rip the arm out of the socket.
Oh my God.
Yeah, or at the very least, it will dissipate wildly without transferring into the racket.
Ah, I see the distinction. It's the difference between a generator and a structural support beam.
Precisely. To hit a heavy smash, the arm must be raised high to intercept the shuttlecock at the apex. Raising the arm requires the deltoids. Stabilizing the humerus bone in the socket as the core rips the body forward requires immense isometric strength from the rotator cuff.
So the muscles are firing just differently.
Right. The big muscles have to engage, but they engage isometrically to transfer the power cleanly, not concentrically, to create the swinging motion.
That is a huge distinction.
It is. If you stay in actor mode, you lack the structural rigidity to handle the payload of a heavy smash.
Okay, so actor mode teaches you the fluid rotation. And once the nervous system understands that the core is the engine, you carefully reintroduce the shoulder as the transmission belt to handle the heavy torque.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But the sources reveal another much more immediate reason why the injured player's permanent actor mode eventually became a liability. And it happens the moment the opponent stops playing a soft game.
Right. We have spent this entire time architecting a beautiful, relaxed, fluid offensive game. The rattle drum, the boiling floor, the finger snap.
Yep.
But what happens when the opponent leaps into the air and hits a 400-kilometer-per-hour smash directly at your chest?
Yikes. This triggers what the breakdown calls the defensive crisis.
And it turns out the exact same biomechanical restriction that made the injured player a maestro on offense, the pinned, relaxed arm, got them completely slaughtered on defense.
Slaughtered.
Yep. The sources reveal a massive vulnerability. The injured player physically could not defend heavy smashes. It exposes a fundamental truth about human biomechanics. The architecture of offense is diametrically opposed to the architecture of defense.
Let's dissect that. If relaxation and the rattle drum are the pinnacle of offense, why does that fail when a projectile is coming at you? Shouldn't a relaxed arm be fast enough to whip the racket into place to block it?
You'd think so, but defense against a high-velocity projectile is not about rotation, and it is not about whipping an arm.
Okay, what is it about?
Defense is about lateral translation and creating a rigid structural shield.
Lateral translation, meaning moving your entire center of mass sideways instantly.
Yes. When a smash is traveling at that speed, the shuttlecock will cross the net and hit the floor in a fraction of a second. You do not have the time to rotate your core.
Right, it'd be way too late.
You do not have the time to initiate a rattle drum whip. You must move your body left or right to intercept the flight path, and more crucially, your arm must act as a shock absorber.
A shock absorber.
To absorb a 400-kilometer at impact, the arm must open wide away from the body, creating a wide protective radius.
And here is where the glass shoulder shatters the reality. If your shoulder is injured, or if you are stubbornly stuck in actor mode,
you cannot lift your arm to open that shield. The pain, or the trained restriction, keeps the elbow locked tightly to the ribs.
So you have no shock absorber. You're trying to block a bullet with your hands basically tied to your chest.
Exactly. And let's look at the physics of the collision. If you try to block a massive smash with your arm locked rigidly against your torso, there is no physical give in the system.
It's just a hard wall.
It becomes an elastic collision off a rigid wall. The high-velocity shuttlecock hits the tight racket face, bounces hard and fast straight up into the air, and sets up an easy, lethal kill for the opponent on the very next shot.
So to softly deflect that kinetic energy, the arm has to be extended away from the body so it can compress slightly backward upon impact, absorbing the force like the suspension of a truck.
You need a healthy shoulder joint to extend that arm, absorb the kinetic payload, and softly guide the deflection. The injured player couldn't do it.
Offense requires the arm to act like a flexible whip, right?
But defense requires the arm to act like the broad, rigid bumper of a goalie sliding across the ice. They were two entirely different physical engines.
Which means the athlete has to be able to instantly toggle between the two engines. You have to go from fluid whip to rigid shield in literal milliseconds.
How does the body negotiate that transition? The sources mention a very specific mechanical trigger called the split step.
The split step is the universal ignition switch for lateral defensive translation. But the nuance detailed in the sources is all about the timing of this trigger.
Okay, timing.
A common amateur misconception is that defense is about early anticipation. They think, I see the opponent winding up for a smash, so I should immediately start shifting my weight to the left to get a head start.
That makes logical sense, doesn't it? I mean, if a car is coming at you, you move out of the way before it gets there. Why is early anticipation a mistake in racket sports?
Because you are dealing with a conscious opponent. If you shift your weight and plant your foot early, a smart opponent will visually register your commitment mid-air. Oh, they'll see you leaning.
They will alter their wrist angle by 2 millimeters, and instead of smashing to your left, they will drop the shuttlecock to your right. You are now caught completely flat-footed with your momentum moving the wrong way.
You committed the chassis before you knew the trajectory.
Exactly.
So if you can't move early, and you can't move late because the projectile is too fast, what is the exact timing of the split step?
You execute the split step, which is a tiny, explosive micro jump at the exact 0.1 second interval when the opponent's racket makes contact with the shuttle.
Wait, you jump at the exact moment of contact?
Yes. The goal is to ensure that at the precise millisecond your visual cortex processes the actual committed trajectory of the shuttlecock, your body is suspended in the air.
Oh, that is biomechanically brilliant.
It really is.
Let me trace the physics of that. If I am standing with my feet planted on the ground and I suddenly realize I need to lunge to my right, I have to overcome static friction. I have to bend my knee, push the earth away, and accelerate my mass from a dead stop.
Which takes precious time.
But if I am already suspended in the air, I am essentially unweighted.
You have momentarily canceled out the grounding effect of gravity. While you are floating in that microjump, your brain calculates the trajectory.
And then?
As you begin to fall back down, you instantly reorient your legs in midair. Gravity and your own inertia pull you down, and your feet strike the floor already angled to push off explosively in the exact lateral direction required.
It's a lateral translation initiated by controlled weightlessness.
It is the only way to move fast enough. And of course, the moment your feet hit the ground and launch you laterally, you must simultaneously throw your arms out wide to catch your balance and form the defensive shield.
Which, again, the injured player was physically incapable of doing.
Right.
It really exposes the breathtaking dynamism required at the elite level. You are bounding off a boiling floor, rotating a rattle drum core, whipping a relaxed arm,
Yep.
but then instantly micro-jumping into weightlessness to transition into a wide structural shock absorber. It's an insane physiological symphony.
And yet, even with perfect mechanics, chaos introduces variables. The sources conclude their biomechanical breakdown with a fascinating scenario regarding micro-adjustments in the heat of battle.
Right. Let's paint the picture of this final scenario. You have executed everything perfectly. You saw the opponent wind up. You timed your split step perfectly at the 0.1 second mark.
You're right.
You landed and dropped into a wide, low defensive squat, your racket hovering near your knees, bracing to absorb a nuclear smash.
But
the opponent mishits, or they deceive you. Instead of a 400-kilometer downward smash, they hit a weak, floating shot that is going to cross the net high up near your chest.
But your racket is down at your shins.
Exactly. You are squatting low, the racket is essentially on the floor, and the target is up high. We've all been in this panic situation in some sport. What is the amateur instinct when faced with this spatial mismatch?
The panic instinct is to yank the arm upward, to use the anterior deltoid to aggressively lift that heavy racket from the knees all the way up to chest height to swat at the floating shuttle.
And based on the physics of the iron door hinge we discussed earlier, that is a catastrophic choice.
It is the absolute least efficient movement possible. The sources break down the two primary reasons why lifting the arm fails here.
Let's hear them.
First is spatial geometry. The physical path the racket head has to travel from your knees, tracing a huge arc up to your chest, is simply too long.
Okay, what's the second?
Second is physiological economics. The startup cost of activating those heavy shoulder muscles from a dead stop is incredibly high.
You have to overcome the inertia of the resting arm, fight gravity, and battle the antagonistic friction of the joint.
Exactly. By the time that heavy iron door swings up to chest height, the shuttlecock has already floated past you.
And to make matters worse, if you are the injured player in the source document, you physically cannot lift the arm. The shoulder joint will not permit the rotation.
So the player was forced to discover a biomechanical workaround. If the racket is low and the target is high, but lifting the arm is forbidden, what do you do?
The solution outlined in the text is so elegantly simple it almost feels like cheating. Don't lift the arm, lift the body.
Precisely. Your arm is already established in a fixed, slightly bent defensive posture down by your knees. Keep it exactly there. Lock the elbow. Do not change the geometry of the upper body.
Okay.
Instead, you push explosively off the floor with your massive leg muscles.
The quadriceps and the glutes.
Right. You perform a rapid concentric extension of the knees and hips. This action raises your entire center of gravity, your whole torso, by 10 to 15 centimeters almost instantaneously.
I love this so much. It's like realizing the passenger is too slow to climb the stairs, so you just rapidly elevate the entire building. The arm just goes along for the ride.
That's a great way to put it. The leg muscles are the largest, most powerful hydraulic lifts in the human body. They are infinitely more capable of rapidly elevating a load than the shoulder is at lifting an isolated arm.
Makes total sense.
So you pop up with your legs. Instantly, your arm, without having done a single joule of lifting work, is now perfectly positioned at chest height.
But there's a missing piece here. The racket face is probably still pointing the wrong way, right?
It is.
If you were dug in ready for a smash, the racket was angled forward or downward to block. Now you are elevated, and you need to actually hit an offensive shot back over the net. You can't swing the arm because the shoulder is locked.
Which brings us to the final brilliant piece of the kinetic puzzle. You have popped up with your legs, your elbow is still locked to your side. To actually strike the shuttle, you don't swing, you fan.
You fan the racket.
Imagine opening a hand fan. You pivot horizontally from the elbow, keeping the upper arm completely anchored to the torso.
Okay.
You fan the forearm outward, and you rely entirely on a sudden, vicious contraction of the finger flexors. That exact 0.01 second watchmaker tightening we discussed in the net served to execute the counterattack.
The sources refer to this horizontal strike as a flat drive or a push.
Yes. It requires almost zero space, zero windup, and zero shoulder involvement. It is pure mechanical efficiency.
That sequence perfectly encapsulates the entire philosophy of this deep dive. When faced with a sudden problem, a shuttlecock in the wrong spatial location, the untrained amateur uses the closest, most obvious tool.
They just yank the arm up.
Right, overloading an inefficient joint.
Mm-hmm.
But the master, or the injured player who is forced by pain to adapt, utilizes the entire kinetic chain.
Yeah.
They evaluate the problem globally.
Yes.
They elevate the massive torso with the legs, they pivot the efficient hinge of the elbow, and they deliver the terminal velocity with the micro-snap of the fingers. They distribute the mechanical work across the systems best designed to handle it.
It is the ultimate lesson in biomechanical literacy. When you truly understand how the disparate parts of your anatomy connect and transfer force, you stop trying to brute force your movements.
You stop fighting your own antagonistic friction,
Right.
and you start allowing kinetic energy to flow unimpeded.
Exactly.
Okay, let's step back and survey the incredible terrain we've covered today. We started with a paradoxical anomaly. An athlete waking up with a crippled shoulder, terrified of the pain, only to discover that the injury accidentally slammed the emergency brakes on years of inefficient macro-muscle habits.
We saw how the fear of pain arrested the arm, forcing the momentum down the chain to fix the drop shot via violent transfer of energy into the fingertips.
We analyzed how locking that same injured shoulder transformed a chaotic, floating excavator serve into a surgically precise watchmaker's micro-manipulation, utilizing the empty grip to bypass biological noise.
We traced the root cause of the injury backward, discovering that attempting to crush the floor actually traps the athlete in a state of global tension and antagonistic co-contraction.
It turns a fluid whip into a rigid iron bar, trapping the kinetic shock right in the shoulder joint. Instead, we learned the necessity of the boiling floor using rapid elastic rebound to keep the hips loose and the chain open.
We unveiled the true source of ballistic power, the rattle drum mechanic. We explored how the massive torque of the core acts as the engine, throwing a completely relaxed arm outward via centrifugal force.
Which eliminates the slow, grinding friction of muscle co-contraction.
Exactly.
We discussed how to hack our own neurobiology using actor mode, pretending to be injured, to build a power exclusion zone which radically forces the lower body to optimize its footwork.
While also mapping the critical limits of that relaxation, we explored the defensive crisis, outlining how defense requires lateral translation via the unweighting physics of the split step.
And how the shoulder must eventually re-engage not as an engine, but as a rigid structural shock absorber.
And finally, we witnessed the ultimate expression of kinetic efficiency. solving a spatial crisis, not by yanking a heavy arm, but by powerfully elevating the entire body with the legs and executing a horizontal fan with the fingers.
True physical mastery, it turns out, is rarely about gritting your teeth, tensing every muscle, and crushing the floor with maximum effort. It is about constructing a relaxed kinetic chain where energy is generated by the core and flows completely unimpeded all the way to the fingertips.
It demands a profound shift in how we interpret the sensation of effort. We must learn that localized tension is often the enemy of global speed.
It really does reframe everything. So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you go about your day. Think about a specific skill or a task in your own life right now where you feel like you are hitting a wall.
Could be anything.
Yeah, maybe it is a sport like golf or tennis. Maybe it's playing a musical instrument. Or maybe it's even a cognitive task like trying to force a creative solution at work. Ask yourself, are you acting like an iron bar? Are you gripping the problem too tightly, tensing every muscle, and trying to push a heavy iron door off its hinges out of sheer exhausting willpower?
That's a great question.
What would happen if you deliberately entered actor mode? What if you intentionally cap your localized effort, relax the primary muscles you normally rely on, and let the natural momentum of the system do the work for you? You might just find that the precision, the power, and the speed you've been desperately searching for were there all along. You just had to stop trying so hard and get out of your own way. It makes you wonder, the next time you wake up with a nagging ache or a physical limitation, maybe it isn't a setback. Maybe your body is forcibly trying to teach you the most important biomechanical lesson you will ever learn.